of Kickstarter to present about the last 365 days at the platform. Elise is the director of narrative film at Kickstarter. She was formerly the deputy director for Doc Society, formerly known as BritDoc, and she works with film organizations and filmmakers worldwide, providing tailored support and mentorship on fundraising and audience building for films in development and in production. Join me in welcoming Elise to the stage.
This is fine, probably. Danae's a bit taller than me, but hi everyone. Nice to see you all. I can see most people, especially if you're wearing white. So as Danae said, my name is Elise, and I'm one half of the Kickstarter film team. We're just going to do a real quick kind of 30-minute race through the last 12 months at Kickstarter. We've had a few kind of exciting moments. We also turned 10 this year, if you can believe it. So we've had an $11 million animation project, unprecedented, and a really great $10 million Netflix deal for the Sundance standout Knock Down the House. So as we kind of race through these milestones of the last year, I'll stop to note any kind of tips on what you should be doing or what you should not be doing when you're running a campaign. Anything that these kind of these sort of standout projects have illuminated for us over the last year. So just as a quick recap, we were founded in 2009. We're in New York City, and Kickstarter is a global crowdfunding platform focused very specifically on creativity, where our mission is to help bring creative projects to life. What do we mean by that? We mean that we are providing an online platform, but also a lot of practical support and guidance to help creative people build a community of support around their projects, obviously also to raise funding, but through multiple small pledges. And worth noting that most projects don't get through with also a small number of larger pledges as well. And by larger, in this context, we mean sort of $500 or more. And I'm talking in US dollars, so I'm sorry, but it's as confusing for me as it is for you. So in 2015, we became a PBC, a public benefit corporation. This is a relatively new corporate structure, and it basically means that we are obligated to consider the implications of our decisions on society. So not only on shareholders. So it basically means that a positive impact on society is kind of hard-coded into our legally defined goals. It's kind of pretty cool and exciting to be part of a company where that is they have this kind of dual bottom line. So as part of that, annually we donate 5% of our after-tax profits to arts and music education and to organizations fighting systemic inequality. Okay, so that's just as much kind of broad context as I'll give us right now. So since I wasn't at TIFF last year, apologies, I will start my year in review at Camden International Film Festival in 2018. I will be there again next week if anyone is making the trip down. But we saw the second year of our North Star Fellowship last year, which brings 5 young, sort of early career, in their 20s, filmmakers of color, up to Camden for a week's mentorship and inclusion in the CIFF one-on-one meetings. Here we have our cohort. Since participating last year, that 2018 cohort has been Sundance funded, become BAVAC Media Maker Fellows. They've been supported by the ICA in London and the Center for Asian American Media on the West Coast. And 3 of those 5 will be back to pitch their projects for real at Camden next week, so if you're there, please look out for them. Our other major support initiative, which doesn't happen in September, but since I'm on the subject, is called the Cradle. That's part of True False Film Festival, and it basically provides free childcare for exhibiting filmmakers. The idea being that we want to kind of try to remove one of the barriers to participating to those filmmakers who have primary childcare responsibilities. I would say women, but we all know that all sorts of people have primary childcare responsibilities. So we've been doing that for, I think, 3 or 4 years now, and we might even predate some of the other childcare initiatives at other film festivals, but anyway. So moving forward, in November last year, the final 2 films of 2018 to receive funding through our Patrons program with the Knight Foundation ran really great great campaigns on Kickstarter. They were both documentaries. So just a bit of context, in 2018, the Knight Foundation committed to provide $100,000 to Kickstarter projects that came out of Knight cities. So those are the cities that they focus their grant making on. And the pledges were made through the site, just like everyone else pledges, and the Knight Foundation pledged through AmDoc, through American Documentary. So it's sort of a beautiful menage a trois between Kickstarter, Knight Foundation, and American Documentary, and we're hoping to continue the program in 2020. So those two projects, those two last projects, which I found through Good Pitch Detroit, a Good Pitch local event in Detroit, were God Said Give 'Em Drum Machines, about the Detroit origins of electronic music, and No Town, about the right to access clean water. So God Said Give 'Em Drum Machines, there we go, is a really interesting case study when thinking about knowing who your audience is and where they go to find out, the information that they're most passionate about. It was really about a great case study in the power of targeting very specific media outlets for a project. And this team obviously recognized they had a really interesting project for the music press. So I pulled this, I know it looks very boring and prosaic, but anyway, it's a table of top referrers for the project. It basically shows the top 20 referrers, i.e. the sites that people came to Kickstarter from, where they were referred from, and 7 of them are music websites. So we've got Resident Advisor, Vinyl Factory, Pitchfork, and the lesson here is basically figure out who your audience is, where do they get their content from, what are they reading, who are the journalists they love, and go in for the kill there. The more specific you can be, the more successful you'll be. So I don't have something for every single month of last year. We do have quieter months and we do have busier months. So I thought I'd take a moment to address the question, when shouldn't I run a campaign? I get it all the time, what time of the year, what time of day, what time of my life, what stage of my project. So there are caveats for all of these, obviously, but I would say that the short answer would be, firstly, avoid the times when everyone is spending money on other things. So the holiday season, avoid early December to probably mid-January, wait for people to get a couple of paychecks back in their bank account. And avoid the times when a lot of people are on vacation. Most people are still pledging from a computer rather than mobile. So they do it when they're sitting at their computer, which is invariably when they're kind of twiddling their thumbs in the workday. So avoid the times, when people are on vacation, i.e. August or June to September in Europe. No, only kidding. So when should I launch a campaign? Our data says that the highest success rate comes for projects launching on a Tuesday early afternoon. That's that big block of green. We have the lowest success rate, apparently, I just discovered this the other week, for projects launching on a Sunday morning. I mean, bear in mind, you can't really see it. There isn't a massive amount of variance, actually, between the bright green and the kind of terrifying red. But, you might as well stack the deck in your favor, despite that, those extreme emotions we attach to those colors. So, Tuesday afternoon, go for it. And this is all Eastern time, so it definitely applies. Okay, so sliding forward, we headed to Sundance in January. We had 5 features and 4 short films that had raised all or part of their budget on Kickstarter. So once we were there, we hosted a kind of landlord infuriating number of quite large gatherings in a very wonderful house that we were ultimately kicked out of. But before that happened, we hosted the teams behind the Kickstarter-funded films Give Me Liberty, which just opened in theaters in New York, and the documentary, as I mentioned earlier, Knock Down the House, and I'll speak a bit about that in a second. We also partnered with Firelight Media to host conversation on race, dismantling harmful narratives, and advancing underrepresented stories. We partnered with the collective organizations representing Asian and Pacific filmmakers, and we partnered with Brown Girls Doc Mafia and with our Canadian friends at Inside Out LGBT Film Fest for our queer warm-up, which is there. And then the party was well and truly stopped by the landlord, but the less said about that, the better. So one of the highlights really to come out of Sundance was Knock Down the House. So it raised a fairly modest amount of money. It was Rachel Lear's and Robin Blotnick's documentary following the US primaries last year. They raised a fairly modest amount of money, sort of $25,000-$30,000 US dollars, and ended up being kind of one of the big hits at Sundance last year. Not least because, I mean, they followed, four amazing, inspiring leaders, but it just so happened that one of them turned out to be Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. We can see her there. So it really did kind of go on a sort of an express train from finishing up at the tail end of 2018, premiering in beginning of 2019, and it was out on Netflix by May of this year. So what this team did, this is a little fuzzy, but you get the idea. What this team did that was so kind of impressive, which is apart from make a wonderful film, is they really set a gold standard in creating a community out of their backers, and including them at every stage of that creative process. So they used an update tool, the update tool on Kickstarter, to send dispatches from the campaign trail as the story was unfolding, sort of giving us all a front row seat to those Democratic primaries. They practiced some, oh yeah, there we go. You gotta have a GIF. I work at a tech company. They practiced sort of very open communication and cultivated a super active readership. And the updates were alone were enough for me to want to put extra money in the pot once I'd already backed it once. Obviously, roll out the red carpet and throw them an after party. And then, cutting to the next month, we got an Oscar, or rather, we didn't. The team behind Period End of Sentence definitely got an Oscar. But, we're pretty proud to see that it was the second short documentary to win the Oscar after 2013. Andrea Nix-Fine won with Innocente. So that team actually ran two campaigns. The first campaign was to fund the technology that made the pads that they were making the film about, and then the second campaign was to fund the film that they were making about the pad machine that they had bought. So it's sort of a testament of the strength of crowdfunding for short docs in particular. Something about the scale of the project, works really well on the site. And an interesting case study of a team running kind of two campaigns and building their their audience over the course of multiple campaigns. So very cool. It's on Netflix. Go and find it. Moving forward to April. Okay, so April was a bit of a wild month. We had a project, Critical Role, The Legend of Vox Machina, which concluded its campaign that month as the highest funded film and video project on the site to date. It launched and hit $1 million in 49 minutes, $2 million in 4 hours, $4 million in 24 hours. It was a very wild time. And while I don't necessarily expect this sort of feat to be replicated often or maybe even anytime soon, this project is a testament to the value of developing your fan base before you launch a project. As a piece of context, because this is the Doc Conference and this is definitely not documentary, Critical Role is a weekly streamed Dungeons & Dragons game that's been running since 2015, and it's also been streamed on Twitch and YouTube since 2018. I have to say, this was a real crash course for me, too. So it turns out that 50 to 75,000 people watch live every week on a Thursday night these games that will go on for, 1 to 4 hours, with sometimes kind of hundreds of thousands tuning in after the fact. So they have this enormous ready-made audience, and they also know exactly where those folks are. They can get right to them. They have a direct line to them. So they got 90,000 backers, and yeah, like, sure, we're not all going to go out and aim to raise $11 million. In fact, this project wasn't aiming to raise $11 million either. It was aiming to raise $750,000. It was going to be one animated special. It is definitely a whole series now. But just this idea of really cultivating that audience before you run a campaign. It's one thing to kind of put together your page and a video and slap up some rewards and, you know, think about that. But the thing that's really going to take the time and is going to pay dividends if you do it right is that kind of building up, that slow build of the audience over time through social accounts, you know, through the cultivation of a very specific voice, your own authorial voice. So yes, whilst the scale is something of an anomaly, the practice of what they were doing applies, I think, probably to, you know, to crowdfunding campaigns, to marketing campaigns, to anything when you're trying to get your message to people. Okay, so moving forward. Oh yeah, I had some gifts and everything. I don't know, I'd never been on Twitch before, but this is what it looks like. They just have hundreds and hundreds of videos. And if you want to get into D&D, I'd say this is the way. Okay, so in June, The Last Black Man in San Francisco, beautiful narrative film, was released in theaters, definitely in the States. Directed by Joe Talbot. Again, it premiered at the beginning of the year to some excellent reviews. And it was kind of a long process for these guys. They raised $75,000 around that back in 2015. And then the project does what lots of projects do, which is they just sort of expand in scope in ways that the filmmakers had perhaps dreamed of, but maybe not hoped, you know? So the project ended up being produced by Plan B and A24. And I would say the lesson that we learned here, and have learned it through several other projects as well, is that filmmakers need to be a little bit careful when they offer their backers a high-res digital download of their film, because I can guarantee you that, you know, in the hoped for and occasionally occurring you know, position that you actually get a great distribution deal, it's going to be really difficult for a distributor to honor that promise that you make to backers. So that is what these guys did, and they had to, you know, figure out some sort of deft, creative, generous ways to reward backers with something that was not a, you know, a digital download to their computer of their film. So that's been my big lesson. It's been my big lesson of the last year, as we've had some films do really well, you know, in ways that they didn't expect maybe, and then have to kind of backtrack and figure out, oh, okay, Netflix won't let me. Turns out Netflix won't let 3,000 people download my film to their computer. So that was a lesson from these guys. In July, the beta version of the pre-show app went live. So if you backed that campaign, if you were one of the, I can't remember how many, 1,600 people who backed that campaign, you've probably been noodling around with this app. It is an ad-supported cinema platform launched by Stacey Spikes, who also launched MoviePass. The idea is that pre-show will drive more traffic to cinemas and increase moviegoing. It's a similar vision in that regard to MoviePass. The principal tool in this is that customers will get free tickets to movies if they sit through 15 to 20 minutes of commercials on their phone, where facial recognition software is used to prove that they definitely watched it. Okay, so maybe we're entering some kind of dystopian reality, but you know what? 1,600 people were like, I'll give it a shot. I like a free movie. They raised like $50,000 or something, and it definitely prompted a conversation about privacy and what we're willing to do for free movies. And most of the headlines were kind of fairly balanced, as you can see, just a kind of, you know, just a standard sort of assessment of what this is. But obviously some people were outraged at the dystopian vision of the future. So cue Vice, thanks very much. Anyway, I didn't back it, so I haven't played around with the beta version, and I don't know, if this is what I would look like if I had, but maybe we'll see it making some more headlines in the future. Okay, finally, it's September. Here we are again. So this month we are launching a new way to celebrate and support independent film called Radical Film Fair. It is based on the belief that physical media isn't dead and could be providing a valuable income source for many filmmakers, a bit like the merch table at a music gig. Maybe the musicians make more money out of that merch than they do off the face value of the tickets. So we just kind of thought we would port that sort of book fair, record fair, comic fair model across to filmmakers, because we just know a ton of people who not only make beautiful films, but just do so many other creative things around it. So it will be this sort of big, day-long jamboree with keynote talks from filmmakers, booths with independent filmmakers and publishers and zine makers who are selling and signing work, a pop-up film clinic where non-profit and DIY film organizations will be giving free advice to filmmakers. So if you are in New York on Sunday, the 15th, we'd love to see you there. And finally, because we're just coming up to time, if you are thinking about running a campaign and you don't know where to start, obviously drop me an email. I'm at film@kickstarter.com. You'll catch me and you'll catch my colleague Liz, because it's really our mission and pleasure to support filmmakers as they figure out a way to be creative, a way to be fully independent, and a way to interact with no barriers with their fans and with their communities. So please feel free to hit me up. I promise to answer your email. We have a couple of minutes for questions. If there are any, feel free to throw your hand in the air. I will, and if not, catch me after I'm here until tomorrow morning. I see a hand there. Yes.
Hi. I'm just curious, all of the projects that you spoke about were very successful ones. I imagine that Kickstarter has thousands upon that are not so successful. Are there ones among the unsuccessful that you are confounded by, that you really don't have any explanation as to why they were unsuccessful, or is it always obvious?
Sometimes it works the other way around, that there are ones that are successful that you're confounded by. I would say that happens more often than not. I think when projects aren't successful, I can be really disappointed by it. It's often the projects that I love and have actually put a lot of work into myself, but it usually makes sense. It's a challenging subject that has been presented in a way that hasn't managed to appeal to the broadest audience, or maybe there was a tiny bit of arrogance with the filmmakers that they thought that this is a shoo-in, and they didn't quite do that groundwork before the project launched. You can usually make sense of it, and it's the ones that raise $11 million through a site that you never heard of that's really confusing. Yeah, got one down here.
I'm just wondering to what extent
Yes.
your campaigns have used targeted ads through Instagram and Facebook and other social sites, if you know the data on that.
I don't know the data, but yes, a lot of projects are really successful by using targeted Facebook ads. The project that I use as the case study most frequently with that is the documentary Unrest by Jennifer Breyer about ME, chronic fatigue syndrome. The reason I used that as a great example was because they were really, again, they could be really specific about who was going to be interested in the film, which was, so they really went hard for people in the medical profession, people training in the medical profession, people interested in alternative therapies. So they knew that was their niche. I think it's a bit more challenging, and it probably doesn't apply so much to this room. It's a bit more challenging with sort of nebulous narrative films with nobody attached that anyone's heard of, and it's a bit more of a challenge to kind of find your niche. But with documentaries, it's a bit easier. And worth saying, actually, the average raise for a documentary is $20,000 versus $12,000 for non-documentaries. So it is as a platform, it's one that kind of works pretty well for docs and works a bit better for docs than it does for fiction. Yes, whoever's got the microphone in their hand can speak. Oh, great, hi.
Whether you have any, wow, I have a voice.
The first bit was that she's a good pitch alumni, yes.
Coming from BritDoc,
Yeah.
I was wondering whether you have advice for raising funds for an impact campaign. Have you had successful Kickstarter campaigns for impact?
Yeah, I actually, when I was at Doc Society, I ran one for an impact campaign for a Doc Society funded project. Yes, we've done lots of projects for impact campaigns, and also for sort of non-traditional theatrical tours. So the Stanley Nelson documentary Black Panther: The Vanguard of the Revolution raised a good amount of money to do a tour of that film. They wanted to go to not the kind of usual stops on the tour. They wanted to go to different kinds of communities. They wanted to make sure that big African American communities, which don't necessarily have cinemas that would show their film in it accessible. So they raised for that. So and actually Josh Fox has a project that's live on the site at the moment for a similar kind of screening tour / impact campaign. But I'm happy I can email you a whole chunk of links for kind of inspiration. And yeah, there's no need to do this work for the first time because we have 26,000 successfully funded projects. So you can always find a kind of a corollary, yeah. Yeah, okay, well, is that one more or is this it? That's what that means. Okay, great. Well, we're gonna do this. Have a really nice day, everyone, and enjoy the next talk.
Thank you so much, Elise. We have a 15-minute break, so feel free to grab a coffee and stretch your legs. We'll begin again at 11:45 a.m. with a conversation with Robert Fisk, Young Chang, and Tom Powers. Thank you.